We're making beef bourguignon, Julia Child's most iconic and intimidating dish, using only Walmart ingredients, including a $10 French burgundy Julia actually recommended. I'll show you a few modern updates like salting the beef early to keep it juicy and full of flavor that improve the original dish without changing what made it special. Because this isn't just a stew, it's proof that with good technique, you can turn everyday ingredients into something that tastes like a $50 French bistro dish. People think beef bourguignon is complicated. It's not. You do 45 minutes of prep, then the oven takes over. The real magic is turning inexpensive cuts of beef into something that tastes expensive. And it all starts with the meat. The biggest mistake home cooks make, even when they follow the recipe perfectly, is buying pre-cubed stew meat. These are scraps and trimmings, mostly from lean cuts like round, with almost no fat or collagen. That means dry, tough, flavorless beef. What you want is a chuck roast, and you can find a good one at any Walmart. It comes from the shoulder, so it's packed with intramuscular fat and collagen. After a slow braise, that collagen melts into gelatin, giving you the meltingly tender beef this dish is famous for. Once you've got your chuck roast home, break it down into chunks yourself. I'm using a 3-pound roast here. It only takes a few minutes, it saves you money, and it gives you full control over size and quality, which you'll never get with pre-cut stew meat. Start by pulling the roast apart into a few smaller sections along the natural seams. Trim off any large, hard chunks of external fat, but leave the marbling. That's what keeps the beef juicy during the long braise. Watch for any silver skin. It won't break down no matter how long you cook it, so slip your knife underneath and peel it away. Once it's cleaned up, cut the meat into chunks about 2 inches across. Big enough to sear well, but small enough to cook evenly. Before we brown the beef, we're gonna do something Julia didn't. Salt it early. In her original recipe, you go straight from cutting to drying to searing. But salting early gives you a serious upgrade. It acts like a dry brine. The salt pulls out a little moisture, dissolves into it, then gets drawn back in, seasoning the meat all the way through and helping it stay juicy during the braise. Leaving the beef uncovered in the fridge also dries the surface, which helps it brown faster and deeper. That browned crust adds extra depth to the stew. Lay the pieces on a wire rack over a baking sheet, salt them generously on all sides, and stick the whole thing in the fridge. If you've got time, overnight is best. If not, an hour still gives you better browning and more flavor. While the beef is doing its thing in the fridge, let's figure out the right wine and how to find it at Walmart. This dish is called beef bourguignon for a reason. Traditionally, it's made with red Burgundy, which means a dry Pinot Noir from the Burgundy region of France. The Walmart near me actually carries one, Louis Jadot Bourgogne Pinot Noir. It's about $20. If you see it, this is the most classic choice, and it works beautifully. But today I'm using a different bottle from the same producer, Louis Jadot Beaujolais Viage. It's only $10, it's made in Burgundy, and Julia herself recommended it, even though it uses the Gamay grape instead of Pinot Noir. So it's absolutely legit. If you can't find either of those, don't worry. Just look for a young, dry Pinot Noir, ideally from Burgundy, but any recent vintage will work. Decent bottles of Merlot or Côte d'Iron make great substitutes. Boxed Pinot Noir is fine too, as long as it's dry and you use about a bottle's worth. Whatever you do, stay away from cooking wine. It's loaded with salt, preservatives, and off flavors. It should be locked up in the Bastille and not used in your stew.
But speaking of drinks that should never be locked up, Cometeer coffee is one worth breaking out. They're the sponsor of this video, and honestly, they saved my coffee ritual. I recently had to quit caffeine, heart palpitations, but I wasn't ready to give up real coffee. Cometeer makes decaf that still tastes like real coffee. And if you're not cutting back on caffeine, they've got a full lineup of regular coffee too, with roasters like Equator, Onyx, and George Howell. They get beans from award-winning roasters, brew the coffee to perfection at 10x the strength, and then flash freeze it to lock in flavor. There's no machine, no mess. You just peel back the lid, pop the coffee out with this little eject button, melt it with hot water, and you're done. For an iced coffee or an iced latte, pour it over ice and water or milk and stir it together. I didn't expect to like a decaf this much, but Nightcap Noir from Joe Coffee kind of surprised me. There's also a really smooth Colombian single origin that is strong and naturally sweet without any cream or sugar. They have a ton of half calves too if you're easing off caffeine but still want a little something. The capsules are fully recyclable and the flavor is seriously on another level. You can get $30 off your first box at cometeer.com/Jason Farmer or just click the link in the video description.
Now let's talk about bacon, and why we're not just tossing it straight into the pan. Traditional versions of beef bourguignon use salt pork, thick, heavily salted, sometimes smoked pork belly. Julia swapped that for a chunk of bacon, but she kept an important technique: blanching it first. And that step still matters today. Most American bacon, especially the kind at Walmart, is thin cut, pre-sliced, and injected with brine and liquid smoke. If you skip the blanching, that salt and artificial smoke can overwhelm the dish and drown out the wine and beef. But the fix is simple. First, go for the thickest cut bacon you can find. Look for plain bacon, no maple, no black pepper, just the standard stuff. Toss it in the freezer for 10 to 15 minutes to firm it up, then slice it into lardons, little matchsticks about 1/4 inch thick and 1.5 inches long. Drop 6 ounces into a pot of simmering water and let them go for 5 minutes. This pulls out the excess salt and softens the smoke, so the bacon adds background depth and not a blast of artificial flavor. Drain them well, dry them thoroughly, and set them aside. Now it's time to sauté the bacon. Heat a Dutch oven over medium heat and add a tablespoon of oil, just enough to coat the bottom. This helps jumpstart the rendering and keeps the bacon from sticking or scorching. Once the oil is hot, add your blanched lardons and cook them slowly. You want them lightly browned and just starting to crisp around the edges, not crunchy like breakfast bacon. When they look good, use a slotted spoon to transfer them to a plate, but leave all the fat in the pot. That's liquid gold, and it's going to give the beef its first big layer of flavor when we sear it next. Now it's time to brown the beef. But first, preheat your oven to 450 degrees. This step is all about building flavor. When you brown meat, you're not sealing in juices. That's a myth. What you're doing is triggering the Maillard reaction. That's what gives you those rich, roasted, meaty flavors that make this dish so satisfying. It only happens with high temperatures and dry meat, which is why we salted the beef early and left it uncovered in the fridge to dry the surface. But take a look. If any pieces look damp, pat them dry with paper towels. Wet meat won't brown, it'll steam. Place your Dutch oven over medium heat and warm the bacon fat. Then work in batches. Don't crowd the pan. That's the most common mistake home cooks make. Add a handful of beef at a time and let each piece sit still for a minute or two until it forms a dark brown crust and releases easily. Then turn and brown all the sides the same way. If the pan starts to look dry between batches, add a splash of oil to keep things moving and prevent sticking. Take your time. Let the pan reheat between rounds if it cools down. And watch for the bottom. Those brown bits stuck to the pot are called fond, and they're packed with flavor. Just don't let them turn black or start to burn, or they'll make the whole dish taste bitter. Once all the beef is browned, remove it from the pot and set it aside with the bacon. Next, we're going to build the flavor base with vegetables. Add 1 sliced yellow or brown onion and 1 peeled carrot to the pot and sauté over medium heat until they start to soften and take on a little color. As they cook, they'll release a bit of liquid, which helps loosen up the brown bits stuck to the bottom. That's called fond. It's pure flavor, and you want that in the stew. If the pot starts to look dry or anything begins to scorch, add a splash of water, wine, or stock to help deglaze. Cook until the vegetables are lightly caramelized, then turn off the heat and add the beef and bacon back to the pot. Now we're going to add the flour. And this step is unique to Julia Child's recipe. So sprinkle 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour over the beef and bacon, then toss to coat. This coats the beef with a thin layer that will toast and thicken the stew naturally as it cooks. Then slide the pot into your 450-degree oven, uncovered, for 4 minutes. This quick blast does 3 things at once. It toasts the flour, forms a light crust on the beef, and sets you up for a sauce that'll thicken naturally later. Pull it out, give everything a quick toss to redistribute the flour, and return it to the oven for another 4 minutes. That second blast finishes cooking off the raw flour and builds a subtle, nutty flavor right into the base of the stew. It's one of those tiny steps that makes a big difference. Now it's time to build the braising liquid and get this into the oven. Start by pulling the pot out of the oven and drop the heat down to 325 degrees. Next comes the wine and stock. And this is one of the most important flavor moments in the whole dish. Pour in 3 cups of dry red wine, then enough stock, 2 to 3 cups, to bring the liquid just high enough for the meat to bob at the top. In classic French cooking, this is called à la fleur, because the pieces of beef look like little flowers floating at the surface. Here's where the stock selection matters more than people think. I've seen dozens of types of broth at Walmart: boxed, canned, organic, low sodium, grass-fed, bone broth. I've tested most of them, and honestly, most are pretty bland. The one I always come back to is better than bouillon. It's a concentrated paste that comes in a jar, and it adds a deeper, more savory flavor than any of the box stuff. If you use it, just know it's already seasoned, heavily, so don't add any salt at this stage. We'll taste and season the sauce at the very end once it's reduced and concentrated. To that liquid, stir in a tablespoon of tomato paste, 2 cloves of grated garlic, 1 bay leaf, a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, and 1/2 teaspoon of dried thyme. If you've got fresh thyme, use about 3 times as much. But dried is totally fine here, and it holds up better during a long braise. Give it all a quick stir. That's your braising base. Cover the pot and slide it into your 325-degree oven. It's going to braise low and slow for about 3 hours, until the beef is fork tender. Check on it about halfway through. If the liquid looks like it's reducing too much, just add a splash of stock to keep things moving. You want the meat mostly submerged the whole time. While that's in the oven, we've got time to prep 2 classic garnishes that help turn a good stew into a great one: glazed pearl onions and sautéed mushrooms. Let's start with the pearl onions. You can usually find these at Walmart in the produce section, often in a little mesh bag on one of those center island produce tables. Look for the white ones, not red or yellow. Now, peeling them sounds annoying, but this trick makes it easy. Drop the onions into simmering water for 1 minute. That loosens their skins. Then drain and plunge them into cold water to stop the cooking. After that, just slice off the top end and the skin should slip right off. If it's still clingy, rubbing them between paper towels helps. Cut off the root end, then use a paring knife to score a small X in the bottom of each one. That little cross helps them stay whole while they braise. Next, heat 1.5 tablespoons each of butter and oil in a sauté pan over medium heat. Once the butter's bubbling, add the onions and cook for about 10 minutes until they're lightly browned. They won't brown evenly, that's okay. Then pour in 1/2 cup of stock or water, season with salt and pepper, and add a bouquet garni. That's just a bundle of parsley, thyme, and a bay leaf, tied together or tucked into a cheesecloth. Lower the heat, cover the pan, and let them braise until tender but still holding their shape, usually about 20 to 30 minutes. Check every 10 to 15 minutes to make sure the liquid isn't reducing too fast. If it is, add a splash more stock or water. Once they're soft but still intact, remove them from the pan and set them aside. Next, let's sauté the mushrooms. Walmart usually stocks white button mushrooms in the produce section. They're affordable, easy to find, and perfect for this step. You'll need about a pound. Rinse them quickly or wipe them down with a damp paper towel to remove any dirt or sediment. Then quarter them. That gives you more surface area to brown and helps them hold up during the final dish. Set a large skillet over medium-high heat and add 2 tablespoons of oil and 4 tablespoons of butter. Once the butter has melted and the foam begins to subside, it's hot enough to add the mushrooms. Toss them in and let them cook, undisturbed, for a couple of minutes so they start to brown. Then sauté until they're golden all over and have released most of their moisture, usually about 8 to 10 minutes. Once they're browned, take them off the heat and set them aside. There's a reason we're cooking everything separately. In classic French cooking, every ingredient has its own ideal cooking time and temperature. If we braised the mushrooms and onions along with the meat, they'd give up all their flavor to the dish, but their texture would be ruined. Cooking them on their own keeps both rich, concentrated flavor and perfect texture. Now let's finish the dish. Once the braise hits the 3-hour mark, pull the Dutch oven out and check the beef. It should be fork tender, easy to pierce with the fork, but still holding its shape. Set a colander over a large bowl and carefully pour everything from the pot through it. Let it drain for a minute, then pick through the colander and transfer just the beef and bacon to a plate. Discard the vegetables. We're only after the flavor they've lent to the sauce, and by now their texture is inedibly mushy. Rinse out and clean the pot, then place the beef and bacon back in. Now pass the sauce through a fine mesh strainer into a small saucepan. Skim off any fat from the surface, then set it over medium heat and let it simmer gently to concentrate. If it's thicker than you want, just add a bit of stock to loosen it. You'll know it's ready when it coats the back of a spoon. Taste the sauce and adjust with salt and pepper. When the sauce is rich and balanced, pour it over the beef and bacon, then fold in the mushrooms and pearl onions. Stir gently so you don't break up the meat. At this point, you've got 2 options. You can keep it warm on the stove or in a low oven until you're ready to serve, or let it cool with the lid off until it reaches room temperature, then refrigerate it. If you can make it ahead, please do. This is one of those dishes that gets better with time. The longer it sits, the better it gets, especially by the next day, when all the flavors have had time to come together. Next, let's talk about side dishes. The most traditional pairing is simple boiled potatoes, tossed in butter and parsley. At Walmart, I like to grab one of the small bags of baby yellow potatoes, the smallest ones you can find. You don't even need to peel them. Just give them a rinse and drop them into a pot of well-salted simmering water. Let them cook until the largest potato is easily pierced with a knife. Once they're tender, drain and return them to the warm pot for a minute or two, uncovered, to let any excess moisture evaporate. Transfer the potatoes to a bowl, then toss in a bit of butter, season with salt and pepper, and stir until everything's coated. Finish with a handful of chopped parsley and give them a gentle toss to distribute it evenly. Boiled potatoes with parsley, the traditional French way. That's all you need. Now let's talk about another classic side dish, buttered egg noodles. This is the second most traditional pairing for beef bourguignon, especially in France, where it's often served with wide pasta to soak up the sauce. At Walmart, look for a bag of wide egg noodles in the pasta aisle, usually on the bottom shelf near the boxed spaghetti and penne. When you're ready to cook, drop the noodles into a pot of well-salted boiling water and cook until al dente. Scoop out about a quarter cup of the pasta water before draining. Return the noodles to the pot, add a bit of butter, and stir gently to coat. Add the reserved pasta water a tablespoon at a time, stirring until the butter melts into a light sauce that coats the noodles evenly. Taste and season with a little salt if needed, and a few twists of black pepper. They should be glossy and lightly coated, not swimming in sauce. Simple egg noodles with butter, nothing fancy. And finally, the most classic green vegetable to serve with beef bourguignon, buttered green peas. I'd always choose frozen peas over canned for this dish. Most frozen peas are flash frozen within hours of being picked, which locks in their sweetness, color, and texture. Canned peas, on the other hand, are pre-cooked and stored in liquid, which dulls their flavor and leaves them soft and mushy. At Walmart, just grab a standard 12 to 16 ounce bag of frozen green peas. You'll find them in the freezer section, usually in the same aisle as frozen vegetables like broccoli and corn. Now for the method. And this is a classic French glazing technique. Set a large pan over medium heat and add 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2 tablespoons of water, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of sugar. Stir that together until the butter melts and gets frothy. Add your frozen peas and stir to coat them in the butter. Lower the heat to medium-low, cover the pot with a lid, and let them cook for 5 to 7 minutes, shaking the pan occasionally so they cook evenly. Take the lid off and check the bottom of the pan. When most of the liquid has evaporated and what's left is a thin, buttery glaze coating the peas, you're done. Turn off the heat, taste, and season with a little extra salt if needed, a few twists of black pepper, and a bit of chopped parsley if you like. Buttered peas, just the way Julia made them. And real quick before the taste test, I've got 2 little upgrades to make the sauce even better. Julia didn't do this, but if she were cooking on YouTube, she might sneak in a little umami boost. A splash of fish sauce or 1 or 2 oil-packed anchovies mashed up and added during the braise won't make the dish taste fishy, but it will add an extra layer of depth that makes the sauce taste richer and more complex. Here's another one I love. After you've turned off the heat on the sauce, stir in a small square of dark chocolate, at least 70 to 75% cacao. You can find bars from Lindt or Ghirardelli at Walmart, usually in the candy aisle. Just a square or 2 is all you'll need. It doesn't make it taste like chocolate, it just balances the wine, deepens the color, and gives the sauce a beautiful gloss. Alright, let's give it a taste and see how it turned out.
Julia Child will get every dish in your kitchen dirty, but beef bourguignon is worth making at least once. It's one of the true masterpieces of French cooking. And shout out to France for backing us during the Revolutionary War. That was clutch.
And if you liked this video, click here to see how I made Gordon Ramsay's beef Wellington using only Walmart ingredients. Thanks for watching. See you next time.